Disclaimer, this video is a tutorial on my marketplace asset now available on the Epic Games marketplace. For anyone interested, there is a link in the description to find it. What is going on, guys? In this tutorial we are going to be combining the flexible combat system with ALS. This tutorial will cover everything you need to know to combine the core of the systems, but I won't be going into detail on smaller areas like maximizing performance or any other small tweaks you might want to change. That will be up to you. And with that, let's get into it. The first thing we need to do is install a plugin from the Epic Games marketplace called the Property Transfer Tool. This tool allows us to easily copy variables and functions from one blueprint to another. So go ahead and install that to the engine version you are using. I will leave a link in the description if you are struggling to find it. The next thing I'm going to ask you to do is duplicate your project in the File Explorer. In this tutorial we will be deleting the skeletal mesh used in the flexible combat system. This is an irreversible action, so having another project in case you have any regrets down the line is never a bad thing. When that's done, we need to create and open a project with ALS using the same engine version. I'll leave a link in the description if you're struggling to find ALS. Pause the video now until it's done. When you're ready, we're going to right-click the ALS folder and select Migrate. Navigate to your Flexible Combat System project in your File Explorer, select the Content folder and confirm. When you're ready, close the ALS project and open up the Flexible Combat System project. Before we start, let's enable the plugin we downloaded. So let's go to Edit, Plugins, and type in Property. Enable the Blueprint Property plugin, then restart the project. I'll see you when it's open again. Okay, first we're going to open both the mannequin and ALS skeletons. So let's go Flexible Combat System, Demo folder, and open up the UE4 mannequin. Then let's go to ALS, Character Assets, Mannequin Skeleton, and open up the ALS skeleton. Now let's hop back onto the mannequin. So we're going to copy all the sockets over from the mannequin over to the ALS skeleton. So let's click the cogwheel and hide bones. Then let's select all the bones on our left hand with clicking and shift clicking them, then right click and copying them. Jump onto our ALS skeleton and right click paste socket to selected bone on the hand bone. Now let's do the same for our right hand and our spine bone. I'm going to fast forward this part. When that's done, save both our skeletons and close them. Now we're going to navigate back to our Flexible Combat System mannequin skeleton under Demo folders, and we're going to select our skeleton and press Delete. When the Delete menu pops up, over the Replace References button, we're going to select our ALS skeleton and press Replace References. What this is doing is deleting our mannequin skeleton and replacing the links to it with our ALS skeleton. This will be for all the animations, blueprints, etc. This only works because the skeletons have the same bone hierarchy. If you did this with a different skeleton, all the animations would be broken. Now, let's jump into the ALS Example Map under ALS, Levels, ALS Demo Map. In the world settings on the right, let's change our game mode over to our Flexible Combat System game mode. And for characters, let's change our character over to the ALS Animation Blueprint. Now let's go to Edit, Project Settings, then under Collision on the left, click New Trace Channel and type Climbable. This allows you to change which objects are climbable. By default, they will be. Now, let's hop into our ALS Base Character Blueprint under ALS, Blueprints, Character Logic, and then double click to open up the character. Under Class Settings, for Parent Class, let's select our BP Player character. This has now made the ALS character a child of the Flexible Combat System character, meaning all the functionality from the Flexible Combat System character will be used for this blueprint. Now under Class Defaults, type in tag into the search bar, add an array element, then type in player into the search bar. Let's hop into the player inputs graph and delete all the ALS inputs. Then let's jump into the get player movement input function, right click and bring in a get move forward node. When this is in, replace the old move forward input. Then bring in a get move right node and replace the right input. Then let's go into the player movement input function and just delete them. We don't need these. And when that's done, hop into the tick graph and we're going to break the top pathway. As we're using the flexible combat system movement, what we've done is break the ALS inputs and unplug the movement and rotation. The input that we do want from ALS, however, is jumping, as this allows us to climb obstacles. So let's hop into our content folder, under blueprints, open up the player character. Then in our event graph under character jumping, let's copy the entire jump section. Hop back into our ALS character, into the player inputs graph, and paste in these nodes. So we still want the ALS functionality, but we also want the flexible combat system functionality just before it. So let's move our functionality in front of the ALS nodes, and I'm actually going to swap our controls around slightly to make things simpler. So if control isn't pressed, I want to run the jump functionality, and if control is pressed, I want to roll. You can set these how you like for this project, but because ALS has so much jumping and climbing, it made sense that spacebar was assigned to that. Then I'm going to plug the is playing roll montage false into the ALS functionality and move the nodes into a better position. So if control is pressed, we roll. If it's not, we run the ALS climb or jump functionality. Okay, now let's select our skeletal mesh in the components tab. And under collision, let's set it to ignore everything, and then block, damage trace hit, and projectiles. Then for our capsule, let's set visibility to overlap, and damage trace hit and projectiles to ignore. Cool, that is collision sorted. Now, we need to make sure the player doesn't use another action while climbing. So let's hop back into our BP player character and create a variable called mantle active as type bool. Then I'm going to control drag it in, press B to create a branch and plug them together. I'm going to place these nodes wherever I have an action that might interrupt the climbing. You may want to tidy this up yourselves and add a few more. However, for this tutorial, I'm going to throw it in front of the left mouse button active, then the right mouse button action, and then in the jump actions conditions. Okay, so we have a prevention bool. Now we need to toggle this bool when we're climbing. So back into the ALS character, in the event graph, let's move our BPI events over, then pull off the macro enum and bring in a equals enum node. Select mantling and then right click and bring in a set mantle active node and plug this in from the bool and into the line. And that is everything for the character blueprints. Let's save and close this and hop into our content folder. Sometimes a few settings can reset inside the ALS character blueprint. So let's jump into ALS, blueprints, and open up the ALS Anim Man. Click on the mesh and type visible into the search bar. If this is checked, uncheck it. Then under character movement, type orient and make sure orient rotation to movement is checked. And lastly, we need to make sure our camera variables are correct. So by variables, press the cogwheel and tick Show Inherited Variables. Then, under Camera Controls, make sure the variables have the following values. Pause the video now and correct these. By this point, you should be able to press play and run around and climb on things. Now, let's do the animation blueprint. Let's quickly hop into the Flexible Combat System one under Animation ABP Player Character. All we're going to do is rename our Turn in Place function to Turn in Place FCS, then rename our Lean Amount variable to Lean Amount FCS. When that's done, press compile. It's now time to use the Property Manager plugin we installed earlier. If you're in UE4, the Property Transfer and Function Transfer buttons should be in the taskbar. If you're in UE5, we need to go to Window and open up both the Property and Function Transfer windows. For our Property Transfer, let's select our ABP Player Character in the Content folder, then click Select as Source. Then let's jump into our Function Transfer and also click Select as Source. Now let's navigate to our ALS ABP under Character Assets, Mannequin Skeleton, and select our ALS ABP. Then for both the Property and Function, click Select as Target. Now for Property Transfer, let's select our top variable, scroll down to the bottom and shift click the bottom one, and press Pick Selected, then Apply and Save. Then let's do the same for the Function Transfer. When that's done, you can close these tabs and open up the ALS ABP. Jump into the Setup Event Dispatchers function, and we're going to right click all the dead variables and click Create. Select the class settings, and under Interfaces, select Add, and add our Character Anim BP interface, then compile. Then let's hop into our ABP Player Character. Copy all the event graph functionality and jump back into the ALS ABP and paste it in. Click Confirm. When it's pasted in, right click, refresh the nodes and compile. All the errors should now be gone. Next, we need to call our Flexible Combat System tick. As we pasted an already existing tick into the graph, the event has turned into a custom event. So let's rename this FCS tick. Then let's jump into the update graph and call our FCS tick event. Plug it into the line and plug the delta time into it. Now let's hop into our Store Character Info function and let's add a pin to our sequence node. Let's right click and bring in our character ref, pull off it and get the mesh, then pull off that and get the Is Playing Montage node. Then pull off that and promote it to a variable called Playing Montage. Connect them up. This will be a condition on when we want to swap over to the ALS climbing functionality. Now, let's jump into our Flexible Combat System ABP and into the anim graph. Again, copy all the nodes and jump back into the ALS ABP and into the anim graph. When you're there, paste in the nodes. First, we're going to disconnect the output pose of the ALS functionality and right click and create a new cache. Call this ALS. When that's done, connect it up. Now, we're going to select the foot IK and press Ctrl X to copy and delete the nodes. Reconnect the line up and paste the foot IK at the bottom of the FCS functionality. Next, we're going to Control X all the offset functionality apart from the post layering cache. Connect the post layering cache into the hand IK, then paste the functionality next to the foot IK nodes. Now let's right click and create a new cache called FCS. Connect it into the turn adjustments path in place of the final state. Now let's bring in our flexible combat system cache and connect it into the ALS offset functionality. Then let's bring in a blend poses by bool node, and for the false, let's plug in our offset path, and for true, let's bring in our ALS cache and connect that in. Then let's bring in our playing montage variable, our bow aiming variable, and our magic aiming variable. Pull off our playing montage bool and bring in a AND node. Then off our bow aiming and magic aiming, bring in a not bool node. Plug these into the AND node and connect the AND node into the blend poses by bool. So when we're playing a montage, we want to switch over to ALS climbing functionality. However, we don't want to do this if we're aiming with the bow or aiming with the magic. Then let's grab our final state cache we unplugged earlier and connect it into the blend poses by bool output node. Cool, so this is all the functionality for the flexible combat system and ALS apart from foot IK and montage slots. So let's add those in now. So let's bring down our blend in montage slot nodes below our other nodes here. Then let's bring in a modify curve node. In the settings for alpha, let's click the bind button and uncheck expose as pin. Then let's right click the node and add a curve pin. Bring in the enable foot IK L and bring in the enable foot IK R pins. Then let's bring in the is an air ball, pull off it and bring in a select float node. Then for B, type 1 and plug the output into the modify curve node. This modify curve node is basically a toggle, with 1 being foot IK in full flow and 0 being no foot IK. Foot IK being the feet adjusting themselves to always touch the ground. Now, let's plug this into our foot IK node we moved earlier, and then let's grab the output pose and connect that into the end. So that is everything we need to do. However, we still have a few issues. If you play now, you'll notice our guy will float across the ground, wiggling his butt. Depending on what game you're creating, this might be what you're looking for, but for us RPG folk, it's not ideal. For some reason, the system doesn't like the default third-person locomotion animations, so to fix this, we can hop into our default locomotion state, into our jog forward state, and into our movement blend space. Then we can swap over our walk and run animations over to the ALS animations. So for walk, we can type in walk ALS and bring in the ALS N walk forwards. And for run, we can bring in the ALS N run forwards. So that fixes that issue. The next problem is that when we equip our bow and arrow, for some reason we start leaning like MJ. To fix this, we can open up our bow idle animation, delete our curve, then press Ctrl Z to undo and save. For some reason the system just needed a change or refresh to work properly. And lastly, we need to hop into our content folder and go to Flexible Combat System, Blueprints, Items, and open up the Pickup Item Blueprint. For the skeletal mesh and static mesh, under collision, turn climbable to ignore. Then back into our content browser, into arrows and arrow parent. For the collision component, turn climbable off for the collision. We don't want our items to get in the way of the climbing traces, so we need to switch these off. And very last thing, we don't want to switch to ALS animation while we're drawing a weapon. So let's hop into the Flexible Combat System folder under Blueprints, Components, and into the Combat Status component. Create a new variable called Changing Weapon as type bool. Then Alt drag it into the graph and set it to true before the Draw Weapon and Sheath Weapon Play Montage nodes. Then set it to false off the end of both those lines. Then let's hop into the Als Animation Blueprint. Now this would be better as an event dispatcher update, however we're just going to put it on tick for now. So let's jump into our store character info function. Bring in our combat status component, pull off it, and bring in a isValid node. Pull off it again and bring in our changing weapon variable. Then pull off the changing weapon variable and promote to variable. Connect this up to the isValid node and plug it into the sequence. Now, into the anim graph, off our blend poses by bool node, let's bring in our changing weapon variable, pull off it, and bring in a not bool node. Then connect it into the and node. And that, my friends, is the combined flexible combat system with ALS. So there are still some small adjustments and bits of tidying up you can do to improve the setup and performance. For performance, I'd recommend having a navigate through the animation blueprint and remove some of the tick functionality where possible. But that is it for this tutorial. I pass the torch to you guys to do any other changes you like. Also, although I feel like I have a fairly good understanding of the ALS system now, please direct your ALS questions to the ALS community, as I am no master. But I hope with this tutorial I have given you enough guidance for you to continue your journey. So thank you so much for watching and supporting the channel and the flexible combat system. I will catch you all in the next one. Peace!